Since before recorded history, the people of Britain have had first-hand experience of the strange and unusual. Spirits who haunt ancient castles, stories of werewolves and banshees roaming the countryside, and fantastic creatures like gnomes, fairies and pixies, all are firmly embedded in our native folklore. This cultural experience makes us uniquely qualified to research these types of phenomena and help us find the truth of the reality that surrounds us. So sit back and relax as your hosts, Irene Allen Block and Mark Johnson, take you on a journey through this strange realm and together help us find the answers to the mysteries that lie just beyond our grasp. Welcome to Paranormal UK Radio.
Hello everybody, this is Irene Allen Block, the host of Paranormal UK Radio, the flagship show on the Paranormal UK Radio Network. And here with me again tonight is my co-host, Marky Johnson.
Marky Johnson?
Marky Johnson.
My aunts used to call me Markle Farkle. I'll never live that one down. Of course, now I just said for the whole world to hear.
Markle Farkle.
So send me your fan mail to Markle Farkle.
Markle Farkle. At Markle Farkle at paukradio.com.
Yeah, well, it would just be mark at paukradio.com. But yeah, send your hate mail there. I love my hate mail.
Yeah, hate mail to Markle Farkle.
Yes.
Okay, right.
So how are you this week, Irene?
How am I? I've hurt my back.
Oh, no.
Like I said before, spring cleaning should come with a government warning mark.
Well, you do have the National Health System over there, so you can go in and get checked out.
The only thing I've been doing is my wardrobe.
Don't you have a separate house for all your clothes?
I need a separate house for all my clothes. I've got two attics and 3 wardrobes and a massive long rail. And that's not counting what's stashed under beds and on top of wardrobes. And, I've got so many clothes, I could fill out Debenhams Superstore.
Well, now that you're retired, you should open your own consignment shop.
Consignment shop? What's a consignment shop?
Well, you could just open your own clothing shop, and you can carry other people's stuff on consignment, where somebody else wants you to sell it for them, and you sell it, and they get a little bit of it when you sell it. No. If anything, this lot's going to go to the jumble sale, and money goes to charity. Well, that's always a good cause. Yeah, of course it is. Of course it is. Either that or a charity shop or something or other, but there is some fantastic stuff there that I either grown out of or I just got bored with. I am a shopaholic, people, for clothes. Literally a shopaholic for clothes, and I've got to rein it in now. I've got to make do for the rest of my life with what I've got. Well, sell it all on eBay and make some money off of it. Well, that's what my daughter-in-law said, That's on eBay. That's what we'll do. Let her have all the designer shoes. We'll add it to the PAUK online store. Get Irene's clothing line, and we'll start posting it there, and people can buy it directly from you. That might be a good idea, because there's a lot of beautiful gowns and everything on there. Absolutely fantastic gowns. Just right for the opera, if you want to go to the opera or anything, or theatre or whatever. Mind you, there half the time now they go, did you know the last time I went to the theatre, they were wearing jeans, jumpers and things like that? It's all changed over the years. They used to keep style, but now there is no style anymore. It's no longer an event. Yeah, well, because they're making everything so bland and generic these days, because, we can't have any elitism. Well, that's it, yeah. That's true. Down with the Royals. But that is a good idea. Maybe I'll sell it on my own website, ireneallenblock.com. There you go. We can have your book section, and then we can have, Irene's closet. Well, half of them still got tickets on. They're still tagged, priced up. Well, that's even better then. Because I just haven't worn a lot of it. I really haven't.
you buy it for the opera in Milan, and you end up going to Covent Garden. So what's the good? You need something warmer.
And so my question is, and I'm sure our listeners are wondering, how is any of this paranormal?
Well, that's it. Well, it is very paranormal to me. You know, it is paranormal to me. Don't worry about it. No, I'm only joking. I'm being a snob. Don't take any notice. I'm common. Don't worry. All right, here we go.
Not talking with your plum in the mouth accent, London accent.
No, I'm talking with my South London bloomin' accent.
Bloomin'. Okay.
Bloomin' accent, my South London. You know, like South London, like that. Oh dear.
Be nice, or I'll bring out Lord Lewis Smythe, formerly of the House of Lords.
Yes, who farts on the benches.
Yes, he does. That's why he was run out of Lords.
That's right.
Yeah.
For excessive flatulence.
Yes. Those plums he was eating in his cheek, plum in the mouth.
Nobody knows what the hell we're talking about, you know that?
No, and hopefully we haven't had everybody just tune out on us yet, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. No, stick around, people. We've got a great show tonight. So why don't we go ahead and we'll introduce our guest.
Go on then.
Okay, that's up to me now, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's your job.
My job. Yeah, I got to do something.
That's your little bit. I do the rest. That's your little bit.
Well, I have to do something on this network, so I guess I'll get to work then. Want to welcome tonight. Our guest is a longtime UFO experiencer, abductee, and also paranormal investigator. Nice rounded out resume there. So we want to welcome Christian Delaney to the program. How are you tonight, Chris?
Oh, thanks very much. That's a mighty fine introduction.
Chris, seeing as I'm being snobby at the moment, do you like to be called Chris or Christian?
Only my mum calls me Christian, so Chris do me. That's fine.
Do you know something? If you were my son, it'll be Christian when you're naughty and Chris when you're good. Is that what it's like, Mum?
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably why I heard Christian quite a bit when I was younger. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, it's nice. It's a nice name. It's a lovely name.
I was only ever called Mark, and then when my mom was mad at me, it was, God damn it, Mark.
Yeah.
And then if she was really mad with me, I didn't hear anything. I just felt the smack of the belt right upside my rear end.
I used to get that. Yeah. Oh dear, the days have changed. Now it's no smacking children at all. It's just not the right thing to do anymore. I get a good clump.
It's always the right thing. They just try to tell you it's not.
Yeah.
I got my butt whooped, and you know what? When I got my butt whooped, I deserved it.
Well, Mark, I got my butt whooped right into my teenager days, right? And I would have rather, as a teenager, had one belt round the bum, whiplash round the bum from a belt, than sit on the naughty step for an hour.
Yeah, now you get timeouts, and they take your cell phone away for a day or two.
And your tablet. And
till you scream and cry and throw a tantrum, then they give it back to shut you up. Anyway, we've totally gone off the rails here. So, Chris, welcome to the program. And for our listeners, can you just briefly recap? Tell us a little bit about yourself, and then I guess we'll talk about the ET UFO stuff first, but tell everybody just a little bit about yourself.
Okay. My name's Christian Delaney. I was a pretty run-of-the-mill sort of child when I was younger. I was into my airfix, liked making models out of planes, like going out and playing before the advent of technology.
Did you blow them up with firecrackers like I did mine?
Oh, yeah. We used to throw all sorts of things in places we shouldn't have done and getting into a lot of trouble. We used to do all that, yeah. just test out the rules and the boundaries. I was just like any other child, really. I just really enjoyed, just life, going out and just with my friends. And I wasn't just interested in kind of down to earth stuff, really. I love planes. That's something I've always loved. And so I really got into FX models. And as I started to get older, I started to be a bit more adventurous with the models I used to make. And so, started to look at things like Lockheed Martin and some of the really ridiculously hard sort of models to make. And then when I was around about 6, everything changed. I had an experience that was a defining moment in my life, which I think changed the pathway of my life completely, whether I liked it or not. And it wasn't just me that experienced it, it was my brother also. We lived at the time above a cafe which my parents ran for many years. And my brother actually spotted it first. He saw something in the window. It was round about sort of midnight, maybe a little bit before. And he spotted something in the window, and then I got very interested because, of course, I thought, well, my brother's never awake at this time. And I then just sat upright. I was about 6 years old, and my brother was just slightly younger. And he just pointed with his mouth open, and I thought, what on earth is he doing? And then I saw behind the sort of blind, I could see a figurine, it looked like a small child, funny enough, but they were very thin. And then my brother said just one thing. He said, "Look at that." And I looked more closely at what he was pointing at, and I could see this sort of, how can I describe it? It was like a small child. But it had a very big head, and it had oval eyes, and it had very spindly fingers, and I just remember being mesmerized by it. And it was sort of almost floating, but it was not moving a muscle. It was absolutely bizarre. You have to remember we're 2 stories up, so it had to be sort of just suspended there. And then suddenly one of its fingers protruded forward and shot this bolt of lightning. I don't know what it was. I can't really explain it. It reminds me of kind of electricity, or what I think electricity would look like. And it was sort of a greeny tinge to it. And it went past us, and the air sort of became very, I don't know, alive. And it was a green tint to it, and it hit the wall. And when it hit the wall, me and my brother just fell asleep. And that's the last thing we remember. But the next morning when we woke up, we heard our parents preparing breakfast, and they were getting ready to start their business for the day. And my brother said, by the way, look at the wall. And I looked at the wall, and there was a crack in between where the line of the doorway would be and the lighting switch. And it was very defined. It was almost like a lightning strike. And it wasn't particularly deep, but my brother said, but look what's inside it. And I looked inside, and there was like a green light emanating from it. It was just something I've never seen before. And that crack was definitely not there the day before.
So it shot something physical into the wall.
Well, even when I talk about it today, I'm totally flummoxed as to what that would be. It almost seemed to be like some sort of sign, because it would only light up when we were asleep. And it would only light up when everything was quiet and the lights were completely off. And then suddenly there would be this green tinge to it. And my brother sort of, I don't know, he took it in his stride better than I did, but I was absolutely mesmerized by it. And he would never talk about that day. In fact, he only talked about it a year ago for the first time. Well, we're both in our 40s now, so it was quite an experience.
So, Chris, the crack that it made in the wall, how big was that?
It wasn't very big. It was about maybe 3 inches. And I can absolutely hand on heart tell you that was not there, because I know that wasn't there, because the following week my father noticed it, and he said, "What on earth have you two been doing in that room?" And he said, "You haven't been knocking something against our wall." I said, "No, we haven't done anything." And then my brother nudged me as if to say, "Don't say anything," because I knew he knew I was going to try and say, "Well, there was a green light out of the window," and he just said, "Don't even bother with that. We're going to get into more trouble, and then he'll think we're lying." So, so I shut up and didn't say anything about it. But then over the years, I tried to help get my brother to talk about it, but he was always quite resistant, because he didn't like talking about things like that. I'm much more open. I will talk about things like that, because I think sometimes that there's something deep going on. I can't think what that would be. I think there's a connection. Yeah. And I'm not sure. It was almost like to say, "Hello, we're here." That's how it felt. And my brother said it's just to say the same thing. He felt that it was just like, like knocking on your door and saying, "Hello, we're in the neighborhood. We're here. We're in your area."
You don't think it was some sort of little device that they shot in there that lights up and watches you, sort of thing, like a camera?
Do you know, that's funny. I didn't think of that. But there's all sorts of possibilities. But I know that when I touched, the crack in the wall, when I touched it, it was very warm.
Just after, was this after it had been done? Or was this at a later date?
And then the funny thing was, about 2 weeks later, it stopped blowing completely.
It stopped blowing.
Yeah.
So it was it could have been that they were observing you. You said that when it's dark, pitch dark, and the house is quiet at night, that's when it lights up.
Yeah.
So you've obviously seen it light up in the dark then.
Oh wow! It was really bright.
Yeah. Could you remember whether, as soon as you caught a glimpse of it being lit up in the dark, whether you suddenly crashed out and went to sleep, or can't remember anymore, as if it was knocking you out, sort of thing?
I'll be perfectly honest. I don't remember if I fell asleep straight away after that event, but I know I was mesmerised by the colour of it, and it seemed to be emanating from something, like you say, it might have been something that went deep into the woodwork or deep into the stone. I don't know. It felt like something was there,
Yeah. It's I just got this picture in my head that you turn around, there's this little boy in the dark, turns around, looks at the wall, it's glowing green, and suddenly, bonk, he's asleep.
That's what I would think too. In fact, it's interesting that you saw the light. I mean, you saw the being at the window.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which, based on your description, almost sounds like a typical gray that people have reported seeing, a gray alien. Did it have a color to it that you could tell?
It seemed quite dark in its coloration. Its eyes seemed a different color, like maybe slightly browner, like hazel color. Its skin color, I think, was dark, some sort of brown again, I think.
Well, there have been reports, Mark, of different variations of these greys, different colouring.
Well, different species and races as well. Now, when the eye itself, you said, was a brownish color, was it all like one color, like sometimes like an insect, or like they show pictures of the gray aliens, or did it actually have an iris and pupil?
Well, from what I remember now, because it's quite a long time ago, but I remember it being like almost reflecting the light back in the room, like as if something was on top of the eye, something reflecting light back into the room. So something was protecting the eye. That's what I always thought. And the coloration was like a hazel color, and it was completely enveloping the whole eye, and there was something in the middle, but I couldn't quite make it out. I presume that would have been an iris, and I think it was slightly darker. I think it was sort of almost like a verging on the black sort of pupil sort of thing. But they were huge. The eyes were huge. They took up so much of the head. Had virtually no nose, and it had almost like there was virtually no mouth either. There was just there were no ears I could see. So it was not. I realised quite soon that it wasn't a boy, so, because boys don't have that. I realised straight away that. And also the really interesting thing about it was, as it was in the air, it seemed to be floating, but not a muscle did it move. It was just like it was almost an animated suspension. It was really strange. I find that really odd. But something that's always stayed with me, definitely. I
find the coloring interesting. In fact, it reminds me a bit of like the Celtic fairy lore. A lot of people, the old stories when they see the little people in the U.S., the Cherokee talk about the little people, and they're always like a brownish coloring. Mm-hmm. So it sounds very similar to that rather than a typical gray, but very interesting. Now, you had that experience when you were 6.
Yeah.
And you have no memory after going to sleep.
No.
But what happened after that? After the green light? Well, even with the green light was still there for a couple weeks. Did you have any other experiences at that time?
Well, yeah, we did, but they weren't necessarily paranormal. We had the family break up. And I went to live with my grandmother, and my brother came with me not long after, and my parents went through a divorce, sadly, and that's all in the past now. But from a paranormal perspective, I then went to live with my grandmother, and she lived in a very haunted house, as I found out.
Oh.
And yeah, I used to see all sorts of crazy stuff. Now, what people used to say to me is, well, you're going through a very traumatic experience. You're 10 years old now. It's probable that you're probably seeing things as a consequence of going through extreme trauma. So,
did your brother see them as well? Well,
my brother did, and he didn't. Sometimes he would see things I would see, and sometimes he wouldn't. It's difficult to say. We know that somebody passed away in the garden many years ago.
I was going to ask you what the history of the house was.
Yeah, somebody passed away in the garden in one of those old, I don't know what you call them, right? They're like a rocking chair, but they're more like a garden rocking chair, if you know what I mean. One of those with the old little roof over the top, and he used to just swing and fall asleep in it. And apparently he fell asleep and died in that. So I always felt a presence in that garden, like someone was there, because I've always been quite a spiritual person. I've always felt I've been connected to the spiritual world anyway, whether I liked it or not. So sometimes I come into a room and I'd go, okay, there's something going on here. And then in other rooms it'd be cold. So, I get that in some of the houses I've lived in over my teenage years. Yeah, I definitely saw him once, and that was in the garden late at night when the sun was going down, and I was playing on my own, and I think my brother was inside, and my grandmother was cooking, I think, and I was just about to leave the garden, and something caught my eye just as I was leaving the garden. I did a double take, and I saw a man standing, waving, and I looked, and I thought, there's a man, a full-grown adult, waving at me in my garden.
Yeah.
I'm going home. So I bolted because I was scared, because I didn't know what I was looking at. And I ran into the house, and I was a bit scared, but I was already sweating from running, so my gran didn't say much about it. My brother was doing his own thing. And about a week later, my grandfather came in from his job, and he said, I've just been speaking to the next door neighbor, and they were talking about that old Jack Lewis that used to live here. And then I heard him do the description.
Yeah.
The description was absolutely 100% the man I saw standing in our garden waving. He had the glasses, he had the black glasses, he had the short, sort of slicked back hair. He's quite large man. He used to wear tank tops, and he had one of those really old tank tops.
So it was like the 1950s, 60s.
Yeah. And he was wearing like hobnail boots, and he had like a very pressed black trousers. And he just described what he would look like when he was in the garden. He was basically, I would imagine, he would have been gardening at some point during. You're
talking about that. I was in someone's house one day, and I was sitting opposite the French doors, and we were chatting away, and I was watching this little old man up the top of the garden, in and out of the potting shed, or in and out of a potting shed, right? And it just didn't register that what I was seeing was not alive.
Yeah, I was the same.
And I got up, I went into the kitchen to get a drink of water. When I came back, sat there in the same seat, looking out that window and looking out those French doors, and there was no potting shed up the garden.
Oh.
Yeah. It's an amazing feeling.
It is. It's really kind of overwhelming. When you're a child as well, you're always taught, well, I was always taught not to talk to strangers. Although he had a very friendly face, and he was waving like he was saying hello, really. I'll never forget his face. It was there. I could see it. And then I asked to see a picture when I was a bit older. And sure enough, it matched. So I was absolutely gobsmacked. He used to drink in the pub literally 100 yards from where my grand's house was, because she owned a B&B at the time, a bed and breakfast. And we used to see a lot of people come and go. And she had a parrot that swore quite a bit. And I used to copy some of the workmen that used to come in and unfortunately swear. But so I picked up a lot of bad words when I was living there. So when as I discovered, this old man the next door, Jack Lewis, who used to live at my grand's house, he used to drink at the pub next door in the Old Bell. And they all knew him in there. They all used to know him. When I described what he looked like, they said, oh, yeah, he'd have been gardening. That was his gardening gear. And some of the old folk that were in there, they knew what I was talking about. And they said, how could you possibly know Jack? He's been dead years. And I said, well, it's a good question. If you really want to know, it's because I've seen him. And they went, yeah, okay. So they thought I was just making it up. But I wasn't, because there's no way I could have made up.
Did your grandmother ever see anything there?
Do you know, she was one of those, she was a very Christian lady, so she wouldn't accept the spirit world particularly. So I was aware that she heard footsteps down in the. We had a larder, and this.
I've got a larder.
That's right. And in this larder, we used to store a lot of food. There was a really, really big old freezer, and it used to. Obviously, she did put a lot of food. She used to want to keep in there. And one day, she was hurrying through with some plates from the place where the men would, or whoever was staying, was eating. You have to pass through the larder where all the food was kept, and as she passed it, she heard footsteps inside. Yeah, and there were hobnail boot sound as well. So you know what I mean? And she sort of double took and went, hello, is there anyone in there? And then moved the curtain to the side, and then realized there was no one there. And then I remember her talking about it to one of the neighbours, and I was only a kid at the time, and thinking, well, that's Jack.
Well, I suspect she often saw things, but she kept it from you children.
I think that's probably true. Also, she didn't really agree with the spirit world. She said it was the devil's work, if I remember rightly. So she kind of would dismiss it, even though she would acknowledge it. I think she would almost like pretend it wasn't really happening, or just put it down to an overactive imagination or whatever, or just hope it was, So that's how she dealt with it.
Okay, Mark, you there? He's very quiet.
Yes, I am.
Isn't he? I like it when he's quiet.
Wow, I was letting you chat away.
Did you want me to go on to my next paranormal event?
I figured what we could do is talk about the UFO experiences first, and then we'll segue over into just general paranormal and your experiences with that and investigations. Sure,
absolutely. So after that initial experience, that already sort of started me on the path of changing my view of the world and reality and what's around us. So I was already started that the door slightly came ajar there. And then my next experience is when I was a teenager, and we had one of our yearly holidays, and I think we went to Tenerife or somewhere like that. Might have been even Portugal. And we were traveling back after a really good holiday on the 757 it was at the time. And we were flying over what I now know to be the Pyrenees, which is the mountain range, for those that don't know, that separates Spain.
You can tell you're an aeroplane man because you give the number of the plane. Where somebody, a normal person like me would say, I was on an aeroplane.
Yeah, I was... Yeah, I've given that away a little bit, haven't I? Sorry, my geekiness coming out there. So consequently, we were, like I say, flying on that plane, going over the Pyrenees. We hadn't really gone too far, but I'll just give you an idea. I was in the window of the plane, and as I looked across the horizon, I saw a beautiful panoramic of lowland northern Spain and lowland sort of France, and then the Pyrenees itself. But we were actually descending a little bit because the cloud base above was giving us a bit of chop. So we were actually experiencing turbulence. So I believe the pilot said we're just going to go down a little bit. We were quite high up. We were about 25,000 feet, I think, or maybe a little bit less. So anyway, as we were descending, we then flattened off for a little bit, and I saw the breathtaking sort of view of the Pyrenees as it snaked off into the distance towards the sea. And then, unbelievably, this is what shocked me. I noticed something came from below, and as I'm looking at it, it's a cylindrical disc, and it just literally stopped midair as we were still flying across the Pyrenees. It didn't seem to be moving, but I noticed the bottom half was spinning, and there was like this funny, shimmery, kind of rusty effect underneath, and there were very small portholes in it. But it was just so shiny. The sun, which was underneath the cloud line, hits that thing, and the shininess just completely blinded you to begin with. And it was like trying to stare into the sun. It was unbelievable. It was so shiny. But then when that sort of dissipated a little bit, I noticed I could see the little portholes around the top, and it was just incredible. I was absolutely snake charmed by it. It was a beautiful thing to look at. I just kept saying to myself, I want to meet the engineer that made that. Because all these years been messing around with Airfix and these silly little models, and I'm thinking, that's the cutting edge of technology, not what I'm making at home.
Well, how old were you again at this point?
Sorry?
How old were you again at this point?
Oh, I was about 14, 15 years old.
Okay.
Yeah. What I was going to say was it close to the plane? Could other people see it?
I'd be absolutely amazed if no one else saw it. And sure enough, I thankfully did get a witness afterwards, purely by chance. I just remember watching this. I just was totally snake charmed by it. It was an incredible thing to look at. I'd never seen anything like that before, and it was just incredible. I was totally mesmerized, like I said. And then suddenly, it just flew off. From a standing start, it flew off at just an incredible rate, and I saw it snake alongside the Pyrenees and go off into the distance. And we hadn't even traversed a quarter of the width of the Pyrenees, and this had done, I would say, 3/4 of the length of the Pyrenees. Now, I wouldn't like to know. I've tried to work it out a couple of times. I think a friend of mine who's into aeronautics said it could have been doing Mach 5 or beyond, based on the trajectory, the distance, and how fast we were going, and all the rest of it. I couldn't work it out, no chance. But he once he put that into my head afterwards, I thought, my God, then that was something else, because that moved from a standing start like I've never seen anything move that quickly. And I've been to air shows, and I've seen some of the fastest things fly around, in the UK. So, I mean, I was just completely like, wow, that was my wow moment. What is that? And it didn't leave a vapor trail. It had no visible wings. And I was just stunned. And the imprint on my mind still is here today. It's almost like, it was like I was meant to see it. It was like I was meant to have that imprint in time in my mind. And it was like, I don't know, like a calling card, like, here we are again, and we want you to know we're here, and we want you to show you what we can do. And I was just stunned. I was stunned into silence, actually, for quite a long time. And I just couldn't stop looking for it as I was looking out the window for the rest of the journey. Could never see it again. Got off the plane and was told by my mother to go and find our luggage on the turnstile, as all children are. And I waited amongst lots of adults. And sure enough, I made sure as I left, I looked around me as I left the seating before I left the plane. And I remember a very tall man with very white hair sitting behind me. And I thought, well, I'm going to ask him, because he was in the window seat too, but just behind me. I thought, if anyone's going to see it, he might have seen it. But I lost track of him in the melee of people, because it was just a bit of a melee. And then suddenly, out of nowhere, he just came forward and grabbed his suitcase and then put it in front of himself and then had a look at the tag. I looked up at him because he was quite a tall man. He was about 6'3", 4". I looked up to him and I said, excuse me, did you see anything funny in the window? And he looked at me and he went, wow. And I thought, he's going to say something. I'm really hoping he says something. And he just went, wow, my wife has told me to stop nattering on about it because she wants me to concentrate on getting the luggage. He gave me a wink and just knocked my little nose and walked off with the luggage. And I thought, did you see a UFO? I mean, that's basically why I'm asking. Did you see a cylindrical disc? And I tugged his arm again. I said, did you see the disc? Did you see it? And he went, please don't ask me about that disc. My wife just will not let me talk about it. She wants me to concentrate on getting the luggage. Sorry, son, I can't help you. But he definitely saw something. He saw
it. Yeah, he saw it.
He wanted to talk about it. And I could hear his wife in the background going, George, will you get the luggage? And I was like thinking, I'm so glad that he volunteered to say that he'd seen something, because you know how you doubt yourself, because
it gave you confirmation.
Yeah. I needed that witness. I needed somebody, because forever and a day I would have been wondering whether I saw it. And I'm so glad he had the courage to dismiss his wife's protestations and actually say, yep, I saw something and it wasn't meant to be there. That's just like, wow. I was just so chuffed, so happy that someone else had seen what I'd seen. I then tried to see if there was anyone else, but I couldn't really, because everyone was it was chaotic. So I couldn't, my parents just wanted to get me out of there. So it was, that was a heck of an experience. When I went home, I basically packed away a lot of my Airfix and said, that's it. There's no point in building that anymore. Because
did you ever try drawing it or anything like that?
Do you know what I did? I started to research just pictures of UFOs. That's all I did for ages, for a long time. And then I came across a book called Monsters, Mysteries, and Untold Secrets, which was written, I can't remember who it was written by now, but he was the first person that I ever read. I'm just trying to think who wrote it now. Somebody I was thinking it was an Australian man, actually. If anybody knows, please let me know. It was a book. It was the first basically paranormal book I ever got my hands on. I got it from the library, and in it had a picture of the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot. It introduced me to that world. It introduced me to ghosts. It introduced me, even though I'd already had paranormal experiences, but I'd never been able to sort of define what it was.
Yeah.
And then I saw the flying saucer, and funny enough, that's how it was described.
So in the book, this cylindrical cigar-shaped thing.
It was cylindrical, definitely cylindrical, and it was definitely spinning at the bottom. It was definitely very, very shiny. The funny, you couldn't see any joins on it. It was just an absolutely incredible piece of engineering, and no wings. It made no vapor trail. It was just, never seen anything like that. It was just astonishing piece of equipment, and it made me doubt that we were alone, because I thought to myself instantly, I started to have messages in my head that we're not alone. That's the feeling I was left from that experience, and I could almost feel like a mental connection with that object. Like, I've done obviously lots of research since, and I think that whoever or whatever was in that craft was symbiotic and very spiritual, and they were reaching out to whoever would be open-minded enough to return. Because I remember almost screwing up my head and shutting my eyes and going, "Who are you? And why are you doing this?" And I that's the question I've been asking ever since. And it kind of an irony that it began that way, and hopefully it won't end that way, and hopefully I'll one day get an absolute proof of that connection. But I know that inside there was something very meaningful about that, and I know it wasn't just meant for me. I know that a lot of people on that plane may have been touched by that experience as well, and who knows how they handled it. But it was a heck of a day. That was that was widening the door even wider. Then that was leading me into it properly, and then I chose to go through the door after that, and became quite obsessive actually for quite many years. In fact, it was to the detriment of relationships and perhaps even my career in different things. It really did change my life path, without a doubt.
Chris, the craft that you saw, did you get a sense of size compared to your aircraft? I mean, could you get an idea of either width or length, or could you tell if it was the same size, bigger or smaller than your craft?
It was definitely smaller. Judging by the distance, it wasn't that far away. I got a very good look at the contours of the vehicle. Size-wise, hard to judge, but I would guess, if I was to guess, I would say the size of a bus. Maybe half the size of a bus. Yeah, so maybe, I'm just trying to think. Yeah, so half a bus. I don't know what that would be in feet. Maybe 15, 20 feet, something like that.
Now, you said you also saw what looked like portals on the side. Yeah. Could you were they just like illuminated, or could you see inside? Could you see any movement?
Well, that was the thing. I couldn't see light, but the weird thing about that was I could see that the coloration was changing inside, but I couldn't tell what those colors were, but I could tell it was almost as if something was inside changing the color, but you couldn't see what it was, but you were seeing the residual shadows from it. Do you see what I mean? The residual shadows hitting the whatever the portals were made of. So I could see some sort of activity, but I couldn't make out what it was. There was no way I could see. It was too nondescript. There were just shadows I could see, nothing more than that.
So you've had, so far at this point in time, about 7 years apart, you had the first experience with your brother, seeing the entity out your window, and then after the flash, falling asleep. The fast forward 7 years or so, and you're on a trip and you see this UFO while you're in a plane. Now, nothing else really happened at that point, I'm guessing. But did anything else start to happen after that fact?
Well, yeah. I couldn't get the imprint of that picture of the UFO out of my mind. It never left my waking day, and I would often go into trances and think about how to meet the occupants and to try and, I don't know, something instinctively told me that I was connected to it. I don't know what it was. I couldn't even, if you try and explain it to somebody, it's quite hard because you feel connected to something that you don't really know what it is, but you know that it's trying to connect with you and they're trying to tell you something. And then I would have quite a lot of dreams that seemed very real, that were about finding out the truth. Now, at the time, I was brought up a Christian, a Catholic, actually. So it was a major psychological shift in my understanding of spirituality, because the super being became something else. It became a tangible sort of entity that wasn't just written in a book, but was an actual living spiritual entity. And I felt that that's what was the big change in me. I became somebody else, because it fundamentally changed my idea of Christianity and the misunderstanding of what people were seeing 2,000 years ago, without being at all disrespectful to anyone in their belief system, of course. But this is my own sort of journey, and this is how I felt it had changed me, because at that point I was very devout. You know, for me to have such a huge change from believing in Christianity in that way, it was a huge change, a huge shift. And the imprints in my mind made a massive difference to my interpretation of what the creator is, or the one, as I understand it now.
It's actually very similar to my own experience with that. I mean, I didn't see any UFOs or anything, but I grew up also in a Christian church, Presbyterian out here, and was trying to be a devout Christian up until, when I got into my late teens, and as I got into my early 20s, my paradigm, my whole belief structure just started to change, and I completely moved away from it, to the point where I was depressed for a while, because I didn't know what to believe anymore. Because, let's face it, you go to church and they drill it in your head. This is it. This is reality. This is real. And then when you start to realize, no, it's not, then you start to question everything. And it makes you double check everything that you think you know.
Absolutely, I agree.
Now, this was your second encounter. Now, did you, and you talked about the dreams that you would have. Did you ever have dreams of being aboard these craft? Yes,
I did, yeah. These were really strange dreams because, in fact, I remember getting very interested in the Travis Walton case, which I'm sure a lot of people know. So I won't go into what the case is about, but there was a very significant bit where I think Travis said he was astonished at the difference between the inside of these vehicles, whatever they are, and the outside, because the outside, it seems like, there's going to be a couple of rooms, maybe 3 or 4 rooms, but when you get in, it's like unbelievable amount of space,
like a TARDIS.
Yes.
Absolutely. It's so deceptive, and it's just incredible, because you're kind of almost shown another world that is so ordered, but yet so spiritual and so laid back. I never felt under any threat, but one thing in the dreams, but one thing that I always felt was odd about them was that, because we live in a world which is full of agendas and deception and people misrepresenting things, you instinctively worry for your safety. But when you're in an alien environment, when you're in an environment you don't know, because you're out of your comfort zone. Yeah. But actually, strangely, I felt totally at ease. which is really odd for me because, yeah, absolutely. Part of it was because, absolutely. Part of it because of that inquisitive side that I have anyway, but part of it because the beings, which I couldn't see that well for some reason, they were almost like cloaking themselves somehow. I don't know how they were doing that. And they would, if I did get a glimpse of them, they would constantly change from one physical being to another. So it was very, very difficult to pin down what they looked like. But one thing I do remember is hearing a voice in my head in the dreams, which would say things like, "Don't worry, we're here to show you the truth." Now, truth is a massive part of Christianity. In fact, truth is a massive part of all our lives. So who wouldn't want to know the truth? So I was instantly hooked. And the way they would speak to you in your head would almost be like before you'd had a headache, and that voice was like the drug that kind of soothes you and makes that pain go away. And it felt very real. I'd often wake up in a sweat and like I'd feel like I'd been there, and I would then be thinking about it for the rest of the day, and I'd be in daydreams and all sorts. It had such a huge impact. And I know that my parents were very worried about me for a while. They took me to a private clinic to get me assessed because they thought I was daydreaming too much. And I kept saying to them, it's because my dreams are very, very, very powerful. Vivid. Yeah, absolutely. They're just unbelievably powerful. And a friend of mine said, you should get regressed. And I was like, what does that involve? I'm not going to end up dancing to Michael Jackson or something like that. And they said, no, it's all on the level, but we'll do it with somebody who knows, what they're doing, and they'll help you unlock whatever's been put in your mind. And I have never done it, but I'm planning on doing it, purely because I'm getting more at ease with those memories and those dreams. Now, a lot of people might look at that and go, well, those are just dreams. They could be things that you've read or things that you've looked at. And I would agree that's a possibility. But some of them were incredibly vivid, and some of them seemed connected with that spherical object that I saw in the sky. And I don't know what it is. There's something inside me that tells me it's them. And I don't know why I say that, but I've been drawn to them ever since, and I'm sure that they've tried to contact me since. But I know that locally where I am, going fast forwarding quite a bit, a friend of mine and I go to certain places where we see multiple objects cloaked in night vision goggles, which we've got, and night vision glasses. And sometimes I've called out and they've actually appeared.
What, like beings, you mean?
No, craft in the sky. Crafts have literally appeared in the sky, and I feel a connection with them. I don't know. It's so hard to talk about this. It's so difficult because I know if I was listening to somebody else, I was saying, but how do you know there's a connection there? And the only thing I can say is it's spiritual. It's a spiritual thing. It is just pure, and it's almost as if we're like family. It's really strange. I can't pinpoint other than that. That's the best way to describe it.
Okay. I have a quick question for you before I go into the next part of this. Is when you're having these dreams, okay?
Sure.
Which I'm not so sure are dreams. That are you, or do you feel like you are you a participant in the dream, or do you feel like you're kind of taking a step back and being an observer? And if you're a participant, do you feel like you are who you are right now?
Well, that's a good question. I think the majority of the time I know it's me, but then I do feel like I'm like somebody else, because I almost feel like I'm watching myself sometimes. I know that's going to sound even more peculiar, because there are some times when this is so hard to explain. it feels like I'm having an out-of-body experience in a dream. Like I'm almost watching myself as a third party.
Mm-hmm.
And then there were some time when I was younger, not long after the experience, sometimes I would cut back and it would be a panther, but it wouldn't be me. It would be a panther, a black panther. And I'd be like, what's happened there? That should be me. Why am I a black panther? And then I would literally, suddenly I'd be in a forest and I'd be trudging around, and that I don't know whether that was just a completely random part of another dream just involved, or whether that was something that was meant to be there. I know that I felt like an animal, and I never desired to feel like a panther. Never gone, oh, I'd really like to be a panther. It's just something that, I don't know, it was very primeval almost. And I remember even feeling the panting, the hearts and everything. It was very real. It felt very real. And I felt the connection between myself and who was around me. I felt like I was being observed a lot of the time. I felt like I was being almost not told what to do, but to show what I can do with my mind and my body and my spirituality, because I would often sometimes get questions from a voice. I couldn't find where the voice was coming from, but the voice would be in my head and it would say things like, so do you understand your spirituality? Do you know your limits? And I didn't really know how to answer that question, because it's quite a profound question. But what I would say is that I would always say that I would have said I'm trying my best. And they would just say, well, that's good for now. And we would move on to talking about other things. But the majority of the time we would talk a hell of a lot about spirituality and about existence and about our purpose. And they would often say very little, but when they did say something, it would be very profound.
Is this in the dreams, Chris, or?
Yeah, I think these were the
conversations. The conversations.
These conversations in the dreams, but the dreams are so odd, because I would catch myself out in my own dream, if you know what I mean. I would go, my God, I wasn't expecting that question. Or I wouldn't put it that way. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't speak that way, which often made me feel like I was having a conversation with somebody else, because I wouldn't speak in that way. And it was kind of, it was kind of scary, but nice. It was really strange, because there were moments where I felt very scared, as I was thinking, okay, where's this leading? And then other times I would be told, no, this is all part and parcel of what needs to happen, So I'm not sure what that need is or why it needs to happen, but it just does need to happen. And when you hear that, you're kind of, okay, well, they're in control of the situation and I've never been harmed, so let's go with that.
I know these dreams are very vivid to you, and could that be one of the reasons why you are able to remember them? Sometimes when you have a dream, you can get up in the morning, you can remember it for about 5 minutes, and suddenly it's gone out of your head.
I can tell the difference between these dreams and other dreams I've had. I know I've had many, many dreams that I can barely remember. And the reason for that is because they're usually quite random and very discombobulated and very
just ordinary dreams.
Yeah, they're just about everyday stuff, stressful stuff or end of the world stuff, which is not one of my favorite things. But I've had some almost comedic end of the world dreams before now, and I've put it down to my fears of what would happen in the human race and if we don't change paths. But I think a lot of what I've been shown, or I think I've been shown in these dreams, is actually an alternative, and a different purpose for us. And because when I was younger, I wasn't really that in tune with the idea of purpose. Although spirituality gave me a purpose, without it, when I came away from it, I lost a purpose in a way, but then gained a purpose by having these UFO experience, or these potential abduction experiences, which suddenly gave me another purpose. And it has definitely helped me understand better our reality and potentially our future. Whereas while I was in the church, they were too busy trying to answer questions for 2,000 years ago, which are still relevant today, but those questions are only relevant for a different perspective and reality, and a different type of spirituality, whereas their reality is actually coexists, but actually I think they want us to understand that there are different pathways for us, not just as a race but as individuals, and they want us to understand that we do have a higher purpose, and I think they want us to embrace the possibilities. And I think a lot of what I've learned from those dreams, because I could go on about it all night because I've had so many, but I think there's definitely a message there for us all, not just for myself, and that is to I think just accept that we're not alone, because if we fight it, or if we try and hide it and deceive ourselves, we'll only lose out in the end, and that would be a real shame.
Chris, you're bringing up so much here, and I actually have 100 different questions. Trying to figure out the best way to go through this here. So let me ask you just concentrate on these dreams or visions that you've had.
Yeah.
In any of these dreams, are you seeing or interacting with other human beings?
Well, it's hard to tell, because I think there were, on a few occasions, there were other people around me, but I couldn't see them, but I could hear them. In fact, yeah, that's right. There was this one dream I remember where I was walking somewhere which I'd never been before, and I heard them leading me on in their voices, and I just remember footsteps behind me, and I just remember being told, "Don't worry, they're here too." And I didn't really I didn't really understand what that meant. And I thought, well, you're trying to reassure me, but you're not really reassuring me in the right way. So, and they heard me say it, but I said it in my mind. I didn't say it with my mouth. And they said, "Don't worry, they're people like you." And I thought, well, I wonder what they look like. So I wanted to look round, but they all seemed to be looking downward, so I couldn't see their face, but they were walking behind me. And we all seemed to be walking into this, I don't know what it's like, a canyon or something, like a really arid place.
Like another planet?
I don't know if it was another planet, because we were breathing. It could have been, I suppose. I suppose if you open your mind up to think that there could be another planet with air, or they'd somehow artificially created that scenario. I don't know, but I just felt there were lots of people behind me, a lot. Like, I could hear all the footsteps. There were loads. And I remember thinking, what the heck am I doing at the front? I don't want this to go wrong because I'm the first one to go. But we almost felt like we were walking towards something that was going to give us something. But I didn't know what that was. I couldn't work it out. I just remember, though, the voice in my head constantly going, "Don't worry, everything's going to be fine. This is something we have to do." They would often say that. And the voice would be almost like a tranquilizer in my brain. It would just like go whoosh, all the troubles are gone. And normally, if somebody said that to me and I'm walking in a place I've never been to before with people I've never even met before behind me, I would be still really scared. But for some reason, that voice just seemed to be like, it seemed to just totally put me at ease. And I don't know, I often think to myself, I was walking, but why would it put me at ease? Because I should be feeling scared here. So that is just, I don't know. Very peculiar aspect of it is that I was second guessing myself a little bit there, but I suppose it's because I trust them. And that's the thing they want more than anything, from what I can tell over the experiences I've had. They want me to trust. And if ever I have a moment of I don't trust, they instantly use a voice that totally changes my mind. And yet what they're saying wouldn't normally do that.
Well, Chris, the one question with all of this I have is have you had any of these dreams, visions, whatever you want to call them, where you are undergoing some type of physical or medical examination? One of the things that so many people who have had abduction experiences talk about, even people like Whitley Strieber, who, they go through sometimes embarrassing and humiliating medical procedures. And do you have any memories of anything like that happening to you?
Not really. I don't remember ever having... the only thing I remember is there was always a bright light, which reminded me of like a floodlight. And it would often be ahead of me, and it would be where the voices would come from. I think some of the places that I was visiting in these craft looked very clinical. They looked incredibly clean. There was not a spot of dust or anything anywhere. And then there was like tables. And there seemed to be very odd looking chairs around, which I don't know what they were for, or they didn't look like normal chairs. They looked like, I don't know, like people could sit in them, but they become part of the chair somehow. They could lock in somehow. That's how it felt to me. Just by the paneling on it, there were these kind of nodes going all the way through the chair, like that was like an energy source from the being would go through. But from the clinical point of view, I don't remember seeing anything to do with like hospitals or anything like that. But it was a very shiny, bright light that would always emanate ahead of me. And sometimes it would move to the left and right, but it would always hide what they would look like to a point. And then sometimes they would come out of the light and I'd go, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. And I would see, I don't know, quite a tall person usually. And they would almost be expressionless, but they would be saying a lot, but they wouldn't move their mouth. And they would often wear like flowing clothes, like the Greeks did, like that kind of old Bronze Age kind of, I don't know, very strange. But no, I don't remember there being any clinical sort of, no, not like a hospital.
Well,
no.
With these dreams and visions that you're receiving, I mean, how does it usually happen? Like, you feel like you wake up in the morning and you have the memories of having this dream or vision, or do they occur during other times? Like, it seems like maybe you zone out and then suddenly you snap back out of it. And do you ever meditate at all?
I think the dreams are quite intense to start with. So I get this feeling like I'm falling, or I'm running, and then suddenly I'm not running and I'm not falling, and then I have this voice that comes that says everything's going to be all right, and don't worry about everything, and if you hear anything over here, it's just us, or if you hear everything over there, it's us, don't worry. And it's kind of unnerving, but because, like I've explained with the voice, they say things like that would normally unnerve me because I'd still feel panicky normally, but their voice somehow totally relaxes me, even though inside I'm thinking, but how is that doing that? Because I can't really see where they are, and I can't understand where I am. And it wouldn't be the same location I would go to. It'd be different places. Like I've explained already, sometimes I would be on a ship, sometimes I would be in a place I'd never been to before, or doesn't look familiar to me, like a canyon somewhere. And sometimes that would be with other people, but I wouldn't really see their faces. When I'm in the dream sequence, it's usually very deep and I don't come out. If I'm in one of my like normal dreams, I tend to flit in and out.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't seem to be as deep.
Does this only happen at night?
Yes, I think so. Yeah, there have been occasions when I was in America once, I experienced a day where I was in the garden and I fell asleep at my parents' house, and they said I was asleep for ages, and I thought I was only asleep for like half an hour or something, and they said, "Oh, you're at least there for 3 hours." I was like, "Wow." I must have been really tired because we'd been out for the day, which is possible. But I had a very intense dream there, and I'd been awake. It was the middle of the day, which again, that's the only time it's ever happened in the day. That was in Phoenix when I was out there.
Irene, are you thinking the same thing I am?
What are you thinking?
About his experiences, possibly. I'm getting more the impression that what you're experiencing isn't a physical abduction at all. Unless you have any memories of being like physically transported out of your bedroom or whatnot. Have you ever had any what they call missing time, where there's just been a unexplained gap in your memory or of time, like a couple of hours have passed without you knowing about it?
Not really.
Okay.
No, I don't remember missing time. No.
It seems to me that your experiences are happening on, for lack of a better term, an astral level. Is that what you think, Irene?
Mm. Oh yeah, definitely. Definitely. But what I wanted to ask was, how often do you have these dreams?
Well, I should really have documented them, really, shouldn't I? But when I was not long after the first experience, I had them a lot when I was a kid. Like between 6 and 15, I was having them at least once a week. And then when I hit 15, and I saw the UFO out the window, they started to get the intensity sort of to waned a little bit. Round about sort of 22, they just completely stopped, but then reappeared again when I reached, I think it was around about 30, yeah, it was maybe 28. I just remember starting to have those dreams again, but they were very similar to the ones in my childhood, but they were almost as if, and they'd only really happen after I'd seen something in the sky, funny enough.
Yeah, Chris, were they more an adult type dream? In other words, when you were a child, were the dreams based on you being a child, whereas as you grew up and everything, they become more adult, more intelligent, more.
I see what you mean. Yeah.
None of the listeners do.
I would say that the majority of the dreams when I was a kid were very much connected with what we saw out the window. So there, whatever those dreams mainly were to do with that, whatever it was, and it was about interacting with me, and about showing me how to play. So daft. How to build blocks, how to do basic things, and then it would sometimes talk to me very briefly, and then other times it would only touch my hand or my neck. I don't know why it would touch my neck, but sometimes it would. And then other times it would point, but I wouldn't know what it was pointing at. It was usually upwards, and I had no idea why it was pointing upwards. Maybe it was trying to tell me that's where it's from. I don't know. And then when I got to 15, yeah, you're right. I think it did change a little bit. It became more about relationships. You know, when you get to that teenage stage, you're very confused, aren't you, about life and about relationships, particularly with other people. And a lot of the dreams were about how to deal with relationships and how to deal with not just relationships with other human beings, but them. So it was how to get the best out of it. So it was teaching me like life skills almost. And then when I got to 28, it became more about the purpose of life, you know?
Yeah.
So it graduated. There was definitely a graduation. I mean, sometimes I would have regressive ones. I would have ones where I was dreaming that I was a teenager again, or appeared to be a dreaming. I don't know, in some sort of dream state. But I would be thinking about myself when I was a boy, and then those experiences with that, whatever it was, as it was telling me stuff about what family means and everything like that. So as you grew and evolved, so did the dreams. And like you say, when it did revert back, that was more than likely because there was something that had to be learned that never was learned at that particular time. It was missed out, maybe.
Kind of like a refresher course.
Right. You're right.
Kind of like a refresher course.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know, I would get the most intense dreams after the most intense parts of my life.
Yeah.
So if, say, something quite dramatic had happened and I wasn't able to process it, I would then usually I'd get some sort of dream that would
simplify it.
Yeah, it would somehow make sense. But they would often, or whatever those things were in the dream, would often come up with things that I don't think I would have come up with. So that's why I've always had a lot of respect for those dreams. I've always felt that there was something reaching out, trying to give me that little bit of extra help that I couldn't give myself. Do you know, because I just wasn't intuitive enough at that age, or I just wasn't making the right decisions. So,
you know, what I find really intriguing about this is, I've had some experiences with, like, with meditation or dreaming and trying to like connect on a spiritual level, and I get filled with a lot of doubt and skepticism, only because if at any point in one of these experiences where I feel like I'm being, I'm asking questions and I'm getting answers, the answers are something I already know. And then I doubt the experience, because it seems like, okay, I'm not getting anything that I don't already know or understand. So, I doubt it. That I think it's just my imagination, because I'm only repeating what I already know. The fact that you're getting things that you're going, whoa, wait a minute, what's that? New concepts, new ideas, I find personally to be more compelling, because if there's an idea that's presented to you that you have no idea about, or the first time you've ever heard of it, then it strikes a chord with you, then it feels like you're actually learning something.
I totally agree. I think the proof for me in my head was I was having that moment where I hadn't felt I had a contact or dreams for such a long time. And then out of absolutely nowhere, I had a very powerful dream that I seemed to be totally out of control. I was almost being pushed. It seemed quite aggressive, actually. It came across that way. It was pushed into the room, and I was almost being like told off. It just felt like I was being told, what are you doing? We haven't come this far for you to stray off the path. That's how it felt. And I was actually given an insight into something that I didn't really know anything about, and that was Buddhism. And I never really paid any attention to Buddhism other than I know about, is it the Dalai Lama? I think I'd heard of that person. That's the only reason I was sort of aware of the Buddhists, sort of what they do and what they think. And I was basically told, this is a good path and maybe you should look at it. And sure enough, I went out and I bought a book. And I bought a book, and it's definitely helped me spiritually understand where they're coming from. Because as far as I can understand, they were trying to, or I believe that they were trying to tell me that their spiritual planes, or the different dimensions of spirituality that they live on, are as complex as the different ideas that within the Buddhist ideology and the way that they think about coexisting in our world. And I suppose in their way they were saying this is the closest thing to the way we are. And I was quite impressed by that, because I hadn't really got a clue all along what they were trying to tell me for years, really. I was kind of at a loss, really, because on the one hand I understood on a very basic level, but I knew there was something more they were trying to show me, but I couldn't quite grasp it. Either I just wasn't picking it up, and then when I got this massive urge to go out and buy a Buddhism book after they explained the spiritual planes and how in their world and in their dimensional spirituality, that's how they coexist amongst us, around us, through us.
Was it Buddhism for Dummies?
That's the one you
because that would be the one I think I would need to get.
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly how I felt, because I'm still not a Buddhist today. I should be, considering what I feel they might have tried to tell me. But what I have done is I've read into it, and I've looked at the ideas behind what it's supposed to mean for a human being, and how to you brought in the meditation as well, which is a massive part of what they do, and it's actually, it's valuing and respecting life, which is something that they seem to value more than anything else.
What I've just found very interesting is how you just described something, how they coexist with us, how they live in our world, how they are within us.
Yeah, that's true.
The one thing that you're bringing up, I'm going to tell you right now that there's so much I want to say, and I'm keeping my yap shut because I want to let you speak and talk about your experiences, but there's so much you're saying that is resonating with me perfectly. It's like, none of the other experiencers that we've had an opportunity to interview before have gone down this path or had this type of experience. Most of them, I mean, even most of the bigger names, have had more in terms of negative experiences or very distressing, traumatic types of experiences where, people, some of these experiences are angry, they're upset, they're saying, why me, why is this happening, and they're dealing with some of these alien races that are being, doing with them like they will, like they're lab rats. People get really upset by this. And yet there's the other side of it, which isn't discussed as much, certainly not in the mainstream, of Are you familiar with the works of Dr. John Mack?
Not really.
Okay. I would recommend, if you get a chance, Dr. Mack was a psychiatrist. I believe it was at Harvard or Yale. I'm going to get yelled at for that one. I'm not sure. But in the 70s and 80s and early 90s, he was a hypnotherapist, and he regressed hundreds of people who've had experiences like yours. And the wide range of what he was able to bring out in his studies, it goes far beyond what most experiencers who come on the radio and tell their stories or write their books about the intrusive types of experiences that they have, and gets more into on the spiritual level and the spiritual interaction that we seem to have in this relationship with these beings. There are many cases of people who talk about remember being one of these beings in a past life, or they've agreed to come here to Earth for a particular mission and live as a human and still deal with all the regular human crap we all have to deal with, but they remember that how they have that connection with these other entities on that spiritual level. There is, as far as Buddhism goes, what I respect about Buddhism, and I sure don't know much about it. I have to admit that. It's not like I've studied it, but from what I know of it, it's one of the major religions out there that is very peaceful, very much in tune with nature, and the whole idea is turning within. When they talk about meditation, you're tuning out all the outside noise in your head, and you're going within, and you're connecting with your higher self, that higher mind, the God consciousness, and feeling that connection with all life, all living things, which would include living beings and entities that are operating on different planes from where we are. The spiritual plane itself is just another one of these different planes that's connected to our physical plane, but yet it also exists separately. It's hard to explain, but it goes into these multiple levels and multiple dimensions of the totality of our universe and our reality. And so I'm really fascinated. Even and I mentioned Whitley Strieber a lot because I've read a lot of his books. We had a chance to interview Whitley here a few months back, and he was one of the first ones that started to bring up the idea that the visitors, as he called them, are very much involved with us spiritually. They were involved in reincarnation, in the life and death process. And he's had experiences with people who have died during his experiences. So this is where I feel like, a lot of people in our fields with paranormal research, let's say, and they look for ghosts, and they want to prove life after death, but yet they don't realize that a lot of these other phenomenon, like the ET or UFO phenomenon, is more interconnected than they realize, because it's all part of the cogs and the wheels and mechanisms that's making this universe what it is. Does that make any sense, or was I just waffling on a bit?
No, I understand. I'm really with that, actually, because how to explain this in a really simplistic term. The message I got is everything is energy. That energy is good and bad at the same time. But the pathways of the spiritual plane and the dimensions that they live on, the reason they're able to coexist with us is because they can help generate energy that comes through the different dimensions, and energy can then come through physical objects. So they have an opportunity to change the pathway of a human being they also have an opportunity to change the pathway of not just a human being, but a nation, a planet, and its direction. The one thing that I learned from that is that that energy is something that is hugely important for the human race and for us individually and for me personally as well, because we all need good energy to live a better life. And that energy is, if you break it down into really what it is, it's atoms. And we live on a rock we call the Earth, which essentially is made of atomized bits of the universe. And each segment, each grain of sand, each thing that grows here is full of energy. And each bit of energy we consume one way or another. So we are essentially this planet. We are essentially this universe. And therefore, the energy that makes what this universe is, we are, whether we like it or not, part of that family. There's no way around it. And as sentient beings, we must understand, for us to grow, we've got to not just look at the Buddhist teachings, but look at what is right and wrong with ourselves as human beings. So because Buddhism is just one branch of the tree of understanding our purpose as a living entity. And the messages I got in later life were that, it's important to remember what you put in the world comes back to you one way or another. And
karma.
That's what the Buddhists call it. And I think it's absolutely true. And that's the message I got from them. And the funny thing is I lost my Buddhist book on a train. I fell asleep and I lost my book. And I was absolutely gutted because I wanted to learn more about it. But do you know what? I was walking through my hometown a while back, and there was a Buddhist guy walking around giving the book out, and he was just accepting money. And I didn't really realize he was a Buddhist. I just thought he was trying to get me to sign up some charity. So I was trying to walk away quickly because I already signed up to a lot of charities anyway. And he stopped me and he literally grabbed my shoulder. He said, "I can see you need the book. You're in a rush."
Oh my God.
And I went, "Right, okay." And I said, what have you got? And he goes, "It's the Buddhism book." I went, without even hesitation, I just bought the book because I thought, okay, that literally is karma. That is like saying you're not going to get away with losing it on a train. You are going to continue to learn, and you're going to continue to understand your purpose as a human being.
It's part of that synchronicity that seems to happen to a lot of us when we deal with paranormal or higher level forces in the universe. Things have a tendency of setting you up to be in the right place at the right time to receive information that you need. And the one thing I also want to point out to our listeners, because what a lot of people don't understand is Buddhism isn't really a religion.
No, it's not.
It's not a religion. So you could be a Christian and you could still practice Buddhism because Absolutely. The philosophies are not in conflict. Yeah. And don't let the fundamentalists tell you differently, because it's a more of a way of looking at life and spirituality, and it's something that can be right alongside your religious beliefs, but it's more of a practice, not a religion. So you're not betraying your religion or being a heretic by looking into this. Wow. I have to say, Chris, I'm just kind of blown away by a lot of this. I'm trying to gather my thoughts here. Now, before I go into it, Irene, do you have any other questions at this time?
I'm just wondering what the book was called. Was it just Buddhism?
Oh.
What did it say?
I think it was just the pathway. I think it was something like the pathway to Buddhism, something like that.
pathway.
Or countdown to Buddhism. It was the. Hold on a minute. Where the hell is it?
Yeah, it goes. Do you have your copy lying around there?
He's lost it again on the train.
Sorry, it's because I've just moved, so I think it's still in my book. Yeah, it's still in my case.
All right. How do you know that this person was a Buddhist?
Well, the one in the street.
Have you ever felt that?
Yeah, go on.
Oh, sorry, I've got a grape stuck in my mouth.
Have I ever felt a grape stuck in my throat? Yeah, many times.
Have you ever felt when you meet someone like this that maybe they aren't who they look like or portray to be?
I know where you're going with that. Do you know the funny thing was when he touched my shoulder and I looked round and I looked at him and I could see that complete calmness in his eyes. And before he even said he was a Buddhist or practicing Buddhism, I could tell he was religious in some way. He had just had that look, but he was dressed in the orange garb.
Yeah.
And I think he said he was actually was it Hari Krishna?
Hare Krishna, yeah. They used to be around quite a lot in the 60s and 70s, but not now.
Yeah, there's still a sect that still practice somewhere. He told me they were out in the country, not far away, and I was. It was in the middle of the street. So lots of people. He only wore a bit of orange, not a massive amount, just like a scarf or something. Yeah. And he had a selection of books, but he gave me that one. He said, "I think you need this."
And was it the exact book that you lost?
It's not the same book, but it's very similar.
Oh, it wasn't the same.
No, it wasn't the same book, but it was the same. What I remember reading of the first book, it was an introduction to looking at spirituality not from an organized religion's point of view, and that's essentially what was being said before. So I'm it's from a paranormal point of view. I think everything happens for a reason. I think all these experiences I had did change my life path, and there's no doubt about it, because if I hadn't have had those experiences, I'm absolutely sure I wouldn't have gone down the pathway I've gone, because I originally would have been probably like my brother, actually, who went into banking and went into accountancy and has got his own business. I've actually spent most of my life helping people through acquired brain injury. So I've spent most of my life helping others.
Yeah. The reason I asked that question, though, was because I've come on many times. I've experienced a presence of a person that they just want that person, like my man on the airport run, Mark.
Oh yes, your mystery guide.
They had a different presence. They were different. Yeah.
They had a different energy.
Yeah, that was totally
energy I'm
different.
Talking about. Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you. There is an energy that some people have tapped into, a frequency. In fact, I'll be even more precise. And that frequency is absolutely the pathway to understanding our existence. And that is what they were trying to communicate to me for a long time. And I think I didn't understand, and I didn't get it. And I've been fortunate enough to, in my view, be contacted by something that was trying to help me understand that frequency, that level of spiritual understanding that actually couldn't be found in interpreted books, but actually the books can help you vocalize it, but it's all about feeling, actually. But these experiences I had with the first one when I was a child, and then the one when I was a teenager, and the subsequent ones which have been more to do with the paranormal, as in the spiritual world, the one thing I've learned is that we need to be in tune with that frequency. We need to be open-minded. We need to open our hearts. We need to open our mind. And we need to get involved with that frequency of thought that energy, that good energy. Because unfortunately, if we carry bad energy and we carry the wrong frequency, we'll attract all the wrong attention.
Yeah, Mark, that's answered our question, why we're so naughty. But you're right. You are definitely right. I will give you that. So, what about the haunting, well, not haunting side, the paranormal side, where investigation of ghosts, was it?
Well, to be honest with you, Irene, when we took our break, we were talking about possibly working on that next time, because I think there's still a lot more to cover where we are here. So first and foremost, we'll say publicly,
okay,
Chris,
then.
we'll have you back. Definitely, and we'll talk more next time on your paranormal experiences. But with
he never keeps me updated, Chris.
Yes. Well, you went to go get your snacks, so. Don't complain if you weren't with the rest of the group.
She was obviously needing some more energy.
Yes,
I was needing something. I don't know about energy.
Well, back's away.
Here's a question for you, Chris. The dreams themselves. Okay,
yeah, sure.
You've mentioned you've had almost like end of the world, post-apocalyptic type of dreams.
Yes, I have really bad ones.
What do those? Could you describe a couple of those scenarios?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So there's been a couple of times when I've been riding a bike, and I've been listening to music and riding through my local park, which a lot of people know it, who from my area would be called the Quarry, which is in Shrewsbury. And it seems so real, actually. You can see leaves coming off the trees, and you can see people walking around, and you can see just the normal goings on in a park, you know.
Is this a dream, Chris, or is this real life?
This is the dream.
Okay.
But it's so real. I can even feel the heat on my skin. That's how, from the sun, you know, it feels like it's real. And sometimes I think I'm awake. It's kind of really strange. I don't like the intense ones because they scare me to death, to be honest, but because they seem so real. And suddenly there seems to be like a commotion going on in the corner of the field, and I become inquisitive, and I start riding my bike towards where there's people surrounding what looks like a radio or something like that, and they basically said that nuclear war started, and we're all going to die. Basically, we've got 30 minutes to decide what to do with ourselves. And the panic and the emotion was just horrendous. Just a lot of bad energy just suddenly arriving. And and then you look around you and you think, what the hell do I do now? I mean, I'm on a bike. It's going to take me 30 minutes to get to my house, by which time we're all dead anyway. So I'm just going to stand where I am. I'm going to try and phone everybody I care for. So you go through phoning all that, and sometimes you get somebody and sometimes you don't, and the time's ticking away. And then the radio starts going dead, and you have to go to another station, and then you have to go to another one. And the people around me are just like, what do we do? And then as time goes on, you think, right, let's go and see if I can get in a car and get to one of my loved ones, my sister maybe or something. So we basically get in a car and drive there as quickly as we can. We're getting there, and there's just pandemonium everywhere. There's people chucking things in cars and they're trying to get away. Where they're going, I don't know, because there's nowhere to go. They're safe. And I get to my sisters, and it's just really hard.
Well, let me ask you this. Does it happen in the dream, or are you just experiencing the dread and pandemonium? Do you actually see anything going on or happening, or is it the lead up to it?
Some dreams do go to the end. There's a blinding flash of light, and I look out the window and I just see everything just disappearing, just getting flattened. There's nothing left, and then there's just like a completely searing yellow light, and then I'm gone. And then I'm back. I'm in bed and I'm like sweating, and it's awful. But I've had worse than that. I've had outbreaks of horrendous diseases that have happened. And then I've been transported to a room where somebody in the laboratory has made a mistake and the chemical's been released, and something they shouldn't be messing around with, something that is an experiment, and it's got into the water source and it's got into the food source, and and then people have traveled really quickly across the world as they can now, and it's all gone wrong very, very quickly. Within hours, many people have died. And in these they almost feel like films almost, because you see films, of course, I tend not to watch horror films. I don't really like horror films, but you do see the odd tragedy film. You see these sort of films, and very similar to that. But the message I get from these very intense dreams are essentially the same as the good dreams in some way. I know that's going to sound odd, but the message is still the same, because the intensity is saying the reason it's intense is because this is a pathway we shouldn't be on. They're trying to warn us.
So you're like getting glimpses into what is to come if things don't change. I
don't want to dream these things. I hate horror films. I hate disaster. I hate negative stuff. I just I stay away from toxic stuff. I try to. It's not good for me or for anyone. So I try and stay away from it. So when I have these dreams, I'm like a passenger. I don't really like being involved in these dreams, but when they happen, I know there's a message there, and it's like saying, as a race, we've got to start looking at ourselves, and we've got to start thinking about whether the energy we're putting out in our world is the right one, and whether we're responsible enough and clever enough to change our direction.
Well, for me, that answer would be no. But you also said something earlier that got my attention, is the fact that these entities, and at this point, I'm reluctant to even refer to them as extraterrestrials, because I think that's not a correct name. I think we may not have a correct term for them. They are definitely different, but yet they're also part of us. But definitely it's not like aliens from Zeta Reticuli coming down, traveling all the way across the universe to meddle on our little blue rock. It's something much deeper and transcends dimensions and time.
I'd agree with that.
You mentioned earlier that they have the ability to change or help bring about, in effect, change in thought and attitude to not only individuals but to whole nations or the whole world. So
I think they can only guide. I don't think they have the ability to directly change things. I think they can guide, but the change has to come from you, from within you.
Well, that's what I've always thought too, but I think you said something slightly different, and I just want to clarify that with you. I mean, what is your thought on that, Chris?
Okay, so the one dream I've had, or the one, I don't know what you would call it, message, whatever you want to call it, which completely flummoxed me, it completely confused me actually when I woke up, was the interventions that they don't want to do are purely down to us looking after this planet. I know that sounds a very tree-hugging 70s sort of thing, but that we we have got this planet is on loan to us, and it's on loan to us because you're right. We have been given an opportunity to make choices, but we've been given the informed choices, and we're still not listening. And the problem is, if we continue to deceive ourselves and continue to lie and deceive ourselves as a race that things are not going in the right direction, then they will have no choice but to try and very how can I put this, subtly get us back on track. If that means subtly or that means a big disclosure, I don't know, but I honestly can tell you that from the intensities of some of the dreams I've had, that we are close to some intervention. And it hasn't been like that in all my dreams. It's only been gathering pace in the last 10 years. In fact, ever since 9/11, actually, that big tower getting the two twin towers, there was something very significant about that. I know, and I feel sorry for all those people that died in it, and I'm not using it for my own use, but there was something very, very poignant about that changing the world we live in.
Changing people's views.
It absolutely, it changed the course of humanity. I mean, if you look at where we've gone now in these, 18 years since 9/11, with the change in worldview, with security, privacy, government intrusion, fear, the selling of fear, and how they've changed society. Now we are literally at each other's throats. Society feels like, especially over here in the States, when everyone over here is absolutely out of their blasted minds.
You said it.
Of course I said it. I mean, it's stupid, but you know what? It's like the inevitable crash. You're seeing that you're heading 80 miles an hour towards a brick wall, and it's like the brakes don't work and you can't do anything to stop it. And it feels like few of us can see this. And we could try to say all we can, but everyone else the lemmings are just heading for that cliff. And you can't stop it. And it makes you wonder, what will happen to humanity as a whole? Will part of humanity survive? Will some of us, hey, we're seeing it. What'll happen to us? Are we going to go along with the rest of them and perish? I don't know. I understand that there's been a lot of other abductees and experiencers who mentioned that they get these kind of messages that we have to change what we're doing. We're destroying the planet. We're destroying ourselves, and yet things just keep getting worse.
Yeah, this is true.
Or some of the messages of change that started off as positive messages of change have now been suddenly twisted and warped into something totally insane, and which means more control, more loss of freedom, more corruption, and it's sickening. So it's hard to tell what will happen. Now, the dreams that you've had, we've got about 6 minutes left in the show, so we will have to wrap this up pretty quickly, because I know time is flying here. When would you say was the last dream/vision that you've had?
Last week.
Last week. Can you remember what that one was about?
Yeah. Okay. It started off with what I thought was I thought it was heaven, to be honest. Or the kind of stereotypical heaven where you're in a cloud and you're talking to people or talking to something, some sort of god. And it announced itself as the one. And I thought that's kind of odd because I've always known it as God. And it said, I'm the one. And it meant it quite powerfully. And it said, I am the one who gives life to others, and I'm the one that gives life to you. In our world, there are creators, and I've given the power of creation to others. Don't waste that opportunity to create for good. And I thought, well, that could mean so many things. I'm thinking, what does all that mean? It's quite important, obviously, the need to tell me this. And then it said, I am the one that gives creation to the others to create. Don't misuse that ability. And I'm thinking, okay, all of us can create. We can have children. We can create things out of, make artwork and so on and so forth. And then I realized it meant it on a biological level, because it then said, I've given the power to the, what was it? It said, just try and remember the exact words. Sorry, let me just think. It said something like, I've given the power to the other creators to create others that have created you. And I thought,
light bulb just went off in my head. And
I didn't really understand. I was like trying to backtrack because I've remembered it ever since. It's like been a very poignant thing. And then the one, as it called itself, said something like, I need to show you all the real reason creation has been given to you. And I didn't really understand what that meant. But
Wow.
So we are one.
Well, there's also, and oh my God, we only have a minute left. Gripe. There's also the idea, and I'm just going to throw this out there, that, we as a human species, we're a hybrid species, that we were created by other intelligences through DNA manipulation, through, not just through regular evolution like we've been taught, because we sprung up kind of overnight out of nowhere, and there's so many things about us, our human bodies, that just don't make sense, don't fit in with the rest of the natural world. And I've heard a lot of talk about us being a hybrid species, that we've been manipulated and quote created, and that some of that creation process is still going on. So this is all fascinating stuff. And I mean, Chris, you've given us a lot to think about, and we have run out of time, and we definitely would like you to come back and we can continue this conversation.
No problem. Yeah, I'd love to.
Now, if anybody wanted to get in touch with you, are you open to talking to folks? Do you want to give information on how people can contact you if they wanted to?
Yeah, sure. Absolutely.
Go ahead.
Okay, so my email address is CM, that's C for Cup, M for Mother, Delta, Echo, Lima, A for Apple, N for November, E for Echo, Y for Yankee, 72 at hotmail.co.uk. You can also contact me at Shropshire Paranormal, which I run a site on Facebook. You're more than welcome to contact me there too. And obviously my Facebook account, which is Delaney M Christian, Delta Echo Lima, A for Apple, N for November, E for Echo, Y for Yankee, M, which means Mark, M-A-R-C, but you'll only get the M, and then dash Delaney, spelt the same way as before. Okay. If anyone wants to contact me, you're more than welcome, and I'll do my best to answer any questions. Okay. I may not have the answers, but a lot of the things I've experienced or I've had put in my head, I'm trying to make sense of it. I really am. It's not easy.
All right. We've literally run out of time, so we're going to have to get going. So, Chris, thank you for being on the show tonight. Don't go away. We're going to talk to you off the air real quick. And
okay, cheers. Thank you.
Well, everyone, thank you again for listening to another edition of Paranormal UK Radio here on the Paranormal UK Radio Network, and we will see you all next week. Everyone, have a great evening.